So now we're going to make a dynamic jump in the structure itself. We have spent up until now all of our time looking at the right angle process, looking at the personal destiny process, and now slowly we're going to move into the transpersonal field. But before we can get to the real transpersonal, in other words, before we can actually get to the left angle cross itself, what we have to deal with is the transition point that takes place at the end of the 4-6 process. In other words, what we're looking at here is the 4-6. This is the end of the right angle. But remember, when we get to the last 7 minutes and 30 seconds of the sun in the fourth hexagram in the sixth line, when we get to near that end of that sixth line, 87%, we're going to have this change that takes place, that there's no place else to go after the 6 but to the 1, and the 1 is always going to represent a new hexagram, which means that the structure of the cross is actually going to change. Now, this first transition is not a pure left angle, even though the cross numbers are the same, and I'll show you that in a moment. In other words, this 4-1, because of the personality is still holding it. It's like having 1 foot over here and 1 foot over there. It still has a right angle personality, but it has a left angle unconscious. All right, so this is a very strange position. Now, you're not going to meet a lot of juxtaposition people. I mean, they're around, but you're not going to meet a lot of people who are a 4-1. Remember, again, this is a small segment in the arc of a line, so you're not going to have a large population group there, but at the same time, very important force. Now, the thing to be clear about this is that you can see that there is because they have a foot on either side, that it is neither personal destiny in that sense, nor is it transpersonal karma. This is a middle ground. This is fixed fate. So again, just so you're really clear about this, here we were where we just finished off. We were at the 4-6. And at the moment that we get to the last 7 minutes and 30 seconds of the sun in the 45-4, there's the 45-4 again. There's the juxtaposition with the 26-4, so that's exactly the same. It's the same personality that was part of the 4-6. But what you notice here is that the 22-6 has become the 36-1, the next hexagram. So the 22, we've gone to the end of the sixth line, and we've made this jump to the first line of the 36. And the same is true on the other side. The 47-6 has become the 6-1. There's the 47-6. At the end of that 6, you're going to jump to the beginning of the 6th gate. You're going to jump to the 6-1. In other words, we have a very different arm of the cross now. This is not the same thing as that at all. Though the personality has remained the same, the personality is always the 45th gate and the 26th gate. You have these transitions that are taking place underneath. You have these transitions that are working at the unconscious level. And by the time you get to this point, you have a different cross altogether. In other words, these 7 crosses that we have been looking at, these right angle crosses of rulership, they all have the same general theme. That is, rulership. That's their theme. And at the moment that we make this transition, we've got a different cross that has a different name, and there's only one variation of it within the structure of the hexagram. And here we have the juxtaposition cross of possession. Now that's very different than the cross of rulership. They may have the same personality, but they don't have the same unconscious, and they have the unconscious in a totally different set of hexagrams. So when we get to the 4-1, we're getting to a very different kind of being. I mean, after all, yesterday we looked at the 1-4, which is its harmony. But the 1-4 is deeply involved in the personal destiny process and is part of the right angle process. And the 4-1 is not. Now think about the nature of fixed fate to begin with. Just these 2 lines. The moment that you're dealing with the 4th line, we know that the 4th line is fixed. We know it's going to be fixed in its way, and it's there to externalize and be influential. Remember the influence inherent in all 4th lines. At the unconscious level, it is a first line, and the first line is the foundation. In other words, what we have here is an opportunistic investigator. And this is somebody that has their own foundation, and they're going to externalize their own foundation. These are very fixed people. And in the fact that they have fixed fate does not mean that they are transpersonal. Even though this is the beginning of what will be the transpersonal process. They're still related to the personal destiny of the right angle below, through the personality. So what they have is a fixed fate. Now that fixed fate may involve others in the transpersonal sense. That fixed fate may leave them totally alone in the personal destiny sense. They are a combination, they are a middle point, a transition point in all of that. The nature of the 4-1 is that the 4-1 is an oak tree. And in looking at the 4-1 as an oak tree, this is a solid, fixed being. And that oak tree, well, maybe one of the branches might bend a little. But it doesn't bend. Now you can chop it down. You can break it and burn it. But you can't expect it to bend. Now the 4-1 has only one purpose in this life, through its fixed fate, to be able to influence others with its foundation. That's its job in life. And that's what they're here for. They're not here to bend. Now, as I said, they can be broken, and the way in which they can be broken is if they don't have a proper foundation. Now think about what we've learned about the fourth line and the need for a benefactor during their period of dependency. And how important it will be for the 4-1 to be able to have a benefactor that provides it with opportunities for education. All first lines are natural investigators. Now when I say education, that doesn't necessarily mean that that has to be formal in the way we understand it. In other words, at the moment that there is a deep interest that the 4-1 is going to express about anything, that a benefactor that is there to be able to help them get access to that, to get into that, is going to be very important for them in their lives. You see, they're going to spend their adult life trying to influence everyone. And if you're looking for a friendly type, you're never going to meet a friendlier type than the 4-1. They have an enormous gift of being able to ingratiate themselves. But after all, they're very fixed. And if you don't like their trip, you're not going to be able to successfully stay in a friendship with them, because they have their fixed way. Now, it's not like the 4-1 is looking for everyone to agree with them. They don't have to have everyone agree with them. But the moment they discover that somebody doesn't agree with them, it's better for both of them to shut up about the subject they don't agree with. Because otherwise the 4-1 is just going to disappear. It's not going to hang around and consistently meet with criticism about the nature of its foundation and how it is expressing it. It's very, very important for the 4-1 to be secure. And when they are secure, they can really be a tremendous influence in their community, but they follow a very, very fixed way. And where they're going in this life and how they're going to get there is truly written in a sense. In other words, this is a very fixed geometry. As we know, as long as we're interfering with our lives, it's not that we are interfering with our geometry. You can't do that. But by interfering with the way in which we perceive the Maya, in which we perceive our movement, we can miss essential aspects that awaken our awareness. Every single human being has a Satori potential every day of life. All of us, all the time. All the time. Because the moment that you're not engaged in trying to control and interfere with your life is the moment that you're open to its stimulation, that you're open to its impact, and that you're much more sensitive to what is there. So the 4-1 needs to be nurtured when it's young. Now the thing about them is they're going to have their own way. So they can appear to be quite different. In other words, they can appear to be quite unusual, and they can appear to be extraordinarily stubborn. Now, one of their ways of dealing with that is by being friendly. You know, the friendlier they are, the less likely it is that people are going to explode on them because of their fixed stubbornness. No, the world is not flat, you idiot. And of course, there they are, you know, solid as a rock. Now, if they do go around the world and discover that you don't fall off, you know, they can die from the shock. No joke. They can die from the shock. In other words, the responsibility, you can see that fourth lines bring parental responsibility much more than any other profile. And it means it's essential to see the need in that dependency to be nurtured. And particularly with the 4-1, because they're going to live such a fixed life, and that their sense of well-being is always going to be determined by how deep their foundation is. You know, if you look carefully, if you look at the 6-1, and the 6-1, this is part of the whole business of intimacy, but more important than that, it's out of the 6th gate that all of the emotional waves are created. It's the foundation of our emotional experience. And the first line of the 6, in its detriment, is all about the inferiority complex. It's one of the things to recognize about all first lines. The first line profiles are always carrying within them an inherent inferiority complex that's waiting. And that inferiority is when they do not feel like they have a solid foundation. And the moment they don't feel like they have a solid foundation, they immediately can get caught up in an inferiority complex about it. Now imagine what happens to a 4-1 whose fixed fate is to externalize the foundation, their foundation. You know, it's not a 4-6 that can externalize the foundation that they see in their aloofness. They can externalize somebody else's foundation. They can externalize somebody else's truth. But when you're dealing with the 4-1, they got to externalize their own. So they have to have the depth. And because they're a fourth line, it means that it's going to have to be nurtured in them. You know, one of the things to understand is that there's 4 different kinds of 4-1s, like there's 4 different kinds of every other profile. There's a 4-1 manifester, and there's a 4-1 generator, and there's a 4-1 projector, and a 4-1 reflector, and they're very different. Oh, they're all 4-1s. But how you're going to bring that one to the nurturing, how you're going to bring them and nurture them through the foundation that they need to have to be solid, that's going to be according to their type. The 4-1 projector has to be invited to knowledge, has to be invited to a career, whatever the case may be. And if you have a 4-1 reflector, you're going to have to recognize that unless you take all the pressure off of them to make any decision until they've gone through at least the 28-day cycle of the moon, and that during that time you talk to them about it, only then are you going to give them their opportunity to be able to enter into something correctly that will give them the solid foundation in their life that will allow them to be an influence later. It's always going to be according to your type. Remember that this is 2 parts of the binary of what it is to be a human being. One part is our human design. It is the mechanism of our vehicle. And in honoring the mechanism of our vehicle, we operate properly in our trajectory. The other side is the profile. The profile is actually outlining for you what your trajectory actually is. And when you bring the 2 of them together, you have our life and its purpose. The moment that you see that the purpose is to be a 4-1 in this life, then it's necessary to find a way as a parent, and again, I'm speaking from that perspective, as a parent to be able to bring your child in a healthy way, to find what is necessary for them, to find the introspection that turns them on, to find the subject that they're ready to investigate. And then they can reach that point of influence so that you know that when they go out of the nest, hopefully before they're 40, that when they go out there into the world, that they not only can stand the pressure that will be around them, but in that they will be a deep influence. That they will have within them the ability to truly get information out and transmit that information to other people. Now, obviously, what you have in this world is an endless number of 4-1s. I have trained, I think, 4 of them now. You have an endless number of 4-1s, who never had the nurturing. You got to be lucky, after all. Some of us are lucky in terms of getting nurturing that's suitable to our design. I had an individual mother. I was very lucky. She always used to say, leave him alone, he's different. I was lucky. If I had had a collective mother, she would have been freaked out every other moment. That's just the luck of the draw. And what we have to do is make sure that it's not the luck of the draw anymore. That everybody has the right, at least to have those around them who have to care for them and nurture them, to understand them and themselves in order to provide a healthy environment for growth. And then we have 4-1s that are very valuable to us. Remember, in the genetic continuity of things, they are a major link. They're a force that brings both left angle and right angle together. They're a merging point. And I've watched them in group situations, and they're wonderful. You can see their ability to commune in that sense with anybody at any level in that spectrum. They just can, very naturally. And yet at the same time you realize that, nothing is going to change them. Nothing is going to affect them. They'll have a conversation and they'll be talking about design and they'll say this, this, and that. And the other person will say this, this, and that. And, they'll go back to saying this, this, and that. They're not going to change their way. It doesn't matter what the other person says. Oh, they take it in. But it doesn't matter what they say. They have their way. They have their foundation. They want to externalize that. Projected attitude. We have the abdicator, and underneath the type is the authoritarian. Now, this is a very different kind of being. In other words, they will abdicate, but they will never give up their authority. Never. Never. At the personality level, when somebody says to them, the world is round, they'll back off. They'll just back off. But underneath, there's that authoritarian that says, I'm the boss, I'm the authority, I know it's right. So that abdication for them is not in any way a surrender. It is simply a backing away, because they are going to stay with their authority, and because their personality is designed for them to be friendly. It's not the kind of people that are going to get outraged that you don't accept their influence. They won't. They will have a very friendly way of backing off and just leaving it alone and continue along with their own process of being their own authority in their own little oak tree. At the most difficult aspect for them is their limited perspective of fatigue, which of course dominates the life of all 4th lines. This whole business of being genetically open to others and therefore ending up with all kinds of people in their process that aren't necessarily good for them. And again, if you're living out your design and you know how to enter into things correctly, then the 4th line person, the 4th line being is not going to suffer from having all kinds of inefficient, lack of value relationships. Underneath that fatigue, the exhaustion with people is a difficult aspect, is the empathy. There's this, after all, the 4-1 is designed to be influential. They're designed to go out there and be the solid foundation that can change everybody else's life. They're great at that. That's what they want to be in this life. So they're very empathic underneath, and these are people that can be deeply exhausted by other human beings. Now remember, I've talked about how they have a breaking point, and they do. If you corner them, you keep on hammering at them, you can destroy them. I mean, you really can. And it's the whole thing to understand about them. That's why they need to have a very solid foundation in life. And that's true for all first lines. If they don't have that solid foundation, if you snap their foundation, you really snap them. And when you're dealing with a 4-1, if you break through what they think is a solid foundation, you destroy them. And like Humpty Dumpty, this is no easy job to put any of those pieces back together again. Nothing sadder than an oak tree that's been cut down. And it's very, very difficult to put that together. So again, the nurturing for them is something that's very important, but they do get this tremendous exhaustion. They're aspire to roll. Again, the irony of fourth lines, the aloneness, it's a protection for them, and the creativity underneath. These are very unique beings. And you can feel the nature of their uniqueness. After all, they're not this or that, and just about all of us are either this or that. One of the things mystically that I can share with you about the nature of left angle and right angle is that left angle and right angle, in terms of our incarnation process and our purpose, has the same values of gender in terms of our physical bodies. In other words, it's really the same as saying male and female in some ways, but it's different. The right angle is fundamentally yin, and the left angle is fundamentally yang. So when you're looking at the juxtaposition, what you're looking at is the hermaphrodite. You're looking at something that's neither this nor that. Now, that being this nor that makes them both interesting and flexible to either side. In other words, they have this ability to be in the middle. After all, they're designed to be that transition point in the middle. So there is a real difference in them, a creative difference in them, but of course that creative difference is nurtured in their aloneness. It's also nurtured by their depth. I mean, one of the things to realize about the nature of intelligence and how intelligence works is that the moment that concepts are translated verbally, that learning takes place by the very person that is giving out the concepts. In other words, the 4-1 has a deep advantage. Their advantage is that they are always ready to tell you about their foundation. And as they tell you about their foundation, they learn. They get deeper and deeper, and they learn social techniques. After all, this is a fourth line personality. It does know the other. And they learn socially how to deliver their foundation. Now, one of the things about them is they're sneaky. Aha! We got a sneaky type here. They're sneaky because what they really do is they make friends with you, and you don't know what their real foundation is. You don't know. They wait for their opportunity to get it out. They're also waiting to see whether you're the kind of people that will pay any attention to that. And they're also looking to see what technique they should use to tell those new friends about their foundation. In other words, they can be quite tricky. So out of nowhere, you suddenly hear them expound on some theory you could never imagine was going to come from them. And you're suddenly looking at them like, where did this come from? Because they found their moment to deliver their influence to you. So that's their sneakiness. But they're also, the more that they can do that, they make wonderful teachers, eh? The more that they can do that, the better they get at it. In other words, they get really good at externalizing the foundation. Now, you can understand how vulnerable these beings are if they don't have a good education or they don't have a good solid foundation. Then they're really in trouble in life. And, of course, they end up, rather than being destroyed, they end up being alone, deeply alone. Alone because they're the only ones, nobody understands me. Nobody knows my truth. Nobody accepts it. Nobody accepts my influence. Nobody, blah, 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 blah. And they end up being deeply alone in life and very withdrawn in this life. After all, the first line has a natural tendency to be withdrawn so it can be prepared. And so this natural tendency and the aloneness theme of the fourth line, that if there is this poor foundation, and they discover very early that they cannot live with the resistance, then these can end up being very withdrawn forces. And of course, given the fourth line dependency, these can be children that are still in their room when they're 40. I hope you make a good living if you have one of those. The bonding strategy. The bonding strategy. We have the confidant or not, which is the personality. And again, we see very clearly what that means in terms of particularly the teenage life, what that is like, that you can only get to intimacy that is going to be healthy for you by going to that intimacy or getting to that intimacy through friendship. And that it's only in that friendship that it's possible to find the right intimacy. For the 4-1, you can also see that for them, intimacy is going to demand that they have a partner that accepts their foundation. This is essential for them. So it's a feeling out process. In other words, every time they make friends, what they're looking for is the potential of a partner that accepts their foundation. Otherwise, they can't have a partner it's just not going to work for them. They can't have a partner that's always going to be resisting their foundation. That's a relationship that isn't going to last very long. It just isn't going to work. At the sexual level, though, the 4-1 is a pursuer. And it's one of those things to see that they are very, very good at pursuing you through friendship. And they're pursuing those that they can externalize their foundation to. It's one of their things. This is the caveman. I'm going to make them my friend, and then I'm going to tell them my truth. And if they like that, then they're my friend. And after all, for some of us, that might be annoying. But however, there's no choice in all these things. It's not like it's their fault. This is the only way that they can operate in this life, and it's the way they're intended to operate. The other thing is that in many ways it's very sensible. I mean, if you take all the 4-1s that we have on the planet, there's tens of millions of them. We take all those 4-1s, they're all doing their job. I mean, they're all finding the right people to influence with their stuff. And of course, everything in the language of fractals, everything is about fractals. Imagine what that's like. Each and every one of us carry within us crystals of consciousness, so-called. Personality crystal, design crystal. And that we know that if we go all the way back to what the physicists call the Big Bang, that what we basically have is simply two crystals. We have a yin one, we have a yang one. These are the primary crystals. Now, when they bang together and they shatter out into the universe, and there are zillions and zillions and zillions of aspects, and everything that we call life is endowed with these crystals of consciousness. But let me take you back as a kind of slow motion movie. I watched that the other day on TV, this wonderful ad of this car that's been parked on a hill in San Francisco going wild by itself. And it smashes through things and through windows and everything else. And it's delightful as they pull all of that back. For some insurance company, they pull all of this stuff back. So imagine what that's like if we pull all of it back in our evolution. We pull all of these crystals back out of us, and we push them back out into space, and we get them back to that original formation. Now think about what that means. It shattered, and it shattered fractally. So what that means is that there are aspects of crystals. Imagine that there might be a crystal inside of one of you that was right beside a crystal that's in somebody else. You're on the same fractal line. We're all on fractal lines. So think about what the 4-1 does. The 4-1 finds those forces in its life that accept its foundation. By the way, it had no choice. That was its geometry. It was the geometry of those that they meet to be there, because those that they meet that take their information and their influence were on their fractal line in the first place. That's the way things work. It's like there's certain people that come to me and they have a reading. But there's other people who can never come to me and have a reading. I'm not on their fractal line. They have to go to somebody else because it's their natural track to follow. And it's the way things are. We're all on different fractal lines, and it's very important to see that that 4-1, this is not a job in life. When they're surrendered to their nature, they're going to meet the forces that are correct for them. They will get to live out their job of influencing those that are on their fractal, who are on their track. It's the way it works. This is the way knowledge moves. You know, if I go back now 13 years, I was all alone under a fig tree with this knowledge, and nobody in the whole world knew anything about it. Now I'm a transpersonal being. I got all this karma loaded up. You're all part of my karma. Oh, all of you something from somewhere. You know. I mean, I'm just carrying this around. You know, and I've got to unload it. But if you weren't there on the fractal, none of this would happen. None of this knowledge would ever have moved out into the world because it needed others. Otherwise, it could not be alive. It's the way things work. It's the way to understand at another way how deeply connected we are to each other. And to see that we all live out a role. It's not just the 4-1s that live out this role. We all live it out through the nature of our profiles. We are part of a living genetic code, a vast code that we're all integrated into. The aloneness and the creativity. And then we come to the bonding strategy, the confident or not. We've seen the pursuer. It's interesting to note that that gift of the 4-1 is that they never give up on trying to find, trying to get that person that will accept their foundation. And when they have a partner, a husband or a wife who says, you have to listen to this is great, they're in heaven. I mean, they're in heaven. That's what they're looking for. And of course, that's what they also need in terms of the nurturing. These are the kind of children that while they're studying something, you don't just nod your head at that as a parent. You get involved with them. Tell me about it. Explain it to me. What are you learning? So that they can get used to articulating and externalizing their foundation. And they begin to develop those skills that they'll need because they have transpersonal skills in their personality. And finally, of course, we come to the benefactor dependent, but when you look at the one underneath, at the unconscious level, at its humanity, you can see that it's driven by being a self-provider. Its dependency is not going to be as extended as the 4-6, as an example. Nor is it going to be as extended as the 2-4. Because underneath here, you have a deep, deep need to be a self-provider. Now, of course, if you nurture this being properly as a child, and you give them a solid foundation, they're actually going to get out of the house pretty quickly. They might be 30. Save you 10 years. So it's one of those things to see that they will really need to have that solid foundation because that's how they're going to make their living in life. I mean, it's also part of it. It's not like it's only one track in the sense of what they know is what they have to put out in the world. It's also about them being deeply involved in their career and being able to build on that foundation in their career in order to be healthy beings. Then they can become self-providers. The difficulty that you have with the 4-1 is that the 4-1 child, see, look, when you're dealing with the 4-6 or the 2-4, they can be embarrassed about their dependency. In other words, there are moments where they can actually feel uncomfortable that they have to be dependent. Now, it doesn't last long, but it is there in them. The 4-1, on the other hand, recognizes that it's its right. It covets the dependency. It says, I need more for this, and I have to have all of these. And I don't really, why don't you get me my own apartment next door or something? Whatever the case may be, they covet the dependency. They really say, I need this, I want this, I have to have this. And of course they pursue it. They go right after it. They say, I want that, and they have to have it. Now, if you're living in America, or you're living in most Western countries where we have a an extraordinary level of affluence, many of these things are possible. But the consciousness of the parent, there is no way that that's what's going on out there other than through luck. Because otherwise it's not there. Luck or deep, deep, deep love. Because, of course, they are going to be very demanding as children, and particularly for ones. And not only they're going to be demanding as children, but they're not likely to be understood well. After all, they're neither this nor that, so that the 4-1 child is kind of like, yeah, where did this one come from? You know, this one came in on a strange line. So nurtured properly, that's the theme that we leave behind. In leaving behind the 4th line is to really see how important it is to recognize that the 4th line needs to be nurtured as a child, that it's going to be dependent, and yet to reward that dependency is to be later to be able to benefit from its benefactor capacity. In other words, if you nurture these children well, they are wonderful children to have in your adulthood. In other words, these are children that can be very beneficial. They will return the energy. That's the beauty of them. They do not, turn their backs on those who provide for them. They will respect that, and they will love that in a very profound way. They will love those people in a very profound way. Very often it's grandparents. Grandparents and grandchildren have a great deal in common genetically. And very often, particularly in our society today, often because of the financial toil of living in Western society, a lot of 4th line children are helped by their grandparents. The grandparent throws in a little extra money for, the expense of school or whatever the case happens to be. But it's so important to see that these children, that they need nurturing. The second thing is to recognize that most people who are coming to human design in this era, come well into their life process. So we have a lot of 4th line beings who are entering into human design and discovering their nature. And basically they're going through a process in coming to grips with themselves in which they have to be dependent. And that they do need benefactors. They do need to be nurtured. So look carefully around you. When you come into contact with 4th line people, and they may not have enough money for a course or whatever the case may be, it's an important thing to nourish them, to help them out as best you can. Doesn't mean you got to take your shirt off your back, but it's about recognizing that by nurturing them, not only do you build a bond with them, that's a deep bond, because they will truly appreciate it, and after all, they are friendly types. You will get the benefit of that. But in the end, when they go through their process, as benefactors, they don't forget who was there for them. And they have energy available for the other in those circumstances. So when we're meeting adults who are entering into this process and they have a 4th line, it's very important to remember they are there to be nourished. Help them out. You'll see that that's really a value in the long term in your relationship with them.